Community engagement is a guiding principle that seeks to develop strong ties and relationships in a community between law enforcement and the people they have sworn to protect. No person believes in this more strongly than our guest today. This week, we're joined by Reverend Markel Hutchins, a longtime activist, human and civil rights leader, professional speaker, and friend to the FOP. Reverend Hutchins has led numerous movements on behalf of humanitarian causes over the course of his 2-decade career. He has earned a reputation as an advocate for fairness and equality, while also being one of the senior leaders behind the Faith in Blue initiative. Today, we will discuss the importance of developing strong ties between communities and law enforcement, while also highlighting some of the projects that the Faith in Blue initiative has been working on with the FOP. I'm Patrick Yoes, National President of Fraternal Order Police, and this is the Blue View. Well, Reverend Hutchins, thank you for joining us, and thank you for all that you do. Just over the years, it's been a pleasure working with you, and your insight and I guess desire to build that bridge between law enforcement and communities we serve has always been something that's inspiring. For our viewers and listeners, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I was born in Stone Mountain, Georgia, to a middle-class family. My father was a contractor. My mother was a government employee. Two of the best I'm going to get emotional talking about it, but two of the best human beings that you'll ever meet. My father passed away in 2018 after he and my mother had been married for 50 years. And my father and mother kind of gave me a sense of commitment to service, to a calling that is bigger than myself. And I've tried to live in a way and serve the greater good in a way that my parents could be proud of. And I as a kid, Pat, I never, I hear a lot of people talk about all the trouble they got in as a child. I started preaching when I was 8 years old. I never had the troubles that a lot of young people did because I never wanted to disappoint my parents. And that's just the truth. I'm not being pious or self-righteous. It's just the truth. And so out of that youthful ministry grew a life of community work and a life of activism. I had the good fortune of being mentored by a lot of the civil rights icons that worked very closely with Martin Luther King Jr., including his wife, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, and so many others. And when I started to see several years ago the direction that I thought was dangerous and counterproductive, that a lot of conversations were going around policing, I knew that we needed to do something different. We've never progressed as a nation when we separate ourselves or segregate ourselves from one another. So when I started to see some folks in one corner yelling, "Our lives matter," different people in different corners yelling, "Our lives matter," I felt that was a recipe for disaster. And I think the escalating crime and violence, the continuing tensions that face law enforcement professionals, and so many other challenges that we face around public safety is a clear indicator that we're in a difficult place and we've got to turn the corner.
Yeah, we are in a difficult place. There's no doubt about it. Just the last 2 years have been extremely challenging for anyone in law enforcement. You can see the toll that it's taken on our profession. We have people leaving our profession at a very high pace. We have the best and brightest are not stepping up. We have a crisis developing in law enforcement. And in a lot of ways, it developed over a time of the dehumanization of law enforcement. Just the attacks on law enforcement as a person. And, law enforcement officers are human too. They feel the same emotions as everyone else. And it's a very difficult time to suit up and show up in communities all across this country. And I think what's lost in all of this rhetoric is that there are some 800,000 men and women who show up every single day and make a difference in their communities. And we focus on a very small percentage of things that happen, and we paint a broad brush of every law enforcement officer. It's created a challenge for us. And that's why I think it's important for the work that you do. And what we're here to talk about today with the Faith in Blue initiative and how we can build those bridges and start those conversations. And when you know people as a person, that's really the first
Absolutely.
step. When you know people as a person, and there's a respect that builds on both sides of this. And what better way in every community? There's two things that every American believes in. All right. I think every American believes that they want to be safe in their communities. They want to feel respected within their communities, and I think every community has their faith-based. They're with their churches. That's two combinations. By linking those two together, we have an opportunity to build those bridges and start those discussions.
And Pat, you're right, and I agree wholeheartedly. But we also have faith in one another. Despite the differences, despite what we see as a constant feed in traditional media, and I mean that media across the board, not just conservative or not just liberal or progressive, across media in general, across social media, there's too much demonization and too much division and not enough focus on our commonalities. There's too much focus on our differences. And the problem that we have is because the narrative in the country is so centered on our differences, it has driven people to their individual corners, and humanity is losing. Most law enforcement professionals don't get in the profession because of controversy. They get in because they want to serve. But people need to know and see and sense and feel the humanity in those law enforcement professionals. And by exchange, the law enforcement professionals need to see and sense and feel and engage the humanity of the people that they're policing, such that the bias increase in both directions. You deal differently with people when you have a relationship with them, when you have a connection to them. And that was the premise behind the creation of Faith in Blue Weekend. The challenges that we face in terms of officer deaths, as you and I know, we both serve on the national board of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial. From 2020 to 2021, the number of officers that died in the line of duty doubled in a single year. We continue to see an alarming attrition rate in law enforcement. Officers are leaving the profession, and the suicide rate among law enforcement professionals continues to inch up. All the while, crime and violence continues to happen. We continue to have tragedies where unarmed people are killed in incidents. For whatever reasons these things are happening, the only solutions that we have will come from us. Yeah. There's a lot of conversation. Look, you and I both believe in some form of police reform and all of that, but the greatest need for reformation in this country today is not in policy and procedure. The answers can't be taught in an academy. They've got to be experienced in the hearts and in the minds of every person in local communities and every law enforcement professional. And that's what Faith in Blue Weekend is intended to do, facilitate that level of engagement, because that's what our nation needs most.
And it starts with one conversation.
Absolutely.
When we take time to understand each other's positions and their needs, there's a whole lot that our officers can learn by having these discussions. There's a whole lot that general public can learn about the complexities of law enforcement. That's why citizens academies are so vitally important, to truly understand the dynamics. You talk about the challenges that we have in law enforcement. Well, here's a staggering one. Over 200 officers have been shot so far this year.
Wow.
And that's in many cases, a large percentage of that is ambush attacks for simply the color of their uniform, because we've created so much rhetoric.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I hate to say this, but we know it's true. There are some people who actually benefit from this discord in this country. If we can ever just take there's a reason why people want to keep us apart.
And I recognize that, Pat. I have been attacked and castigated, and had my legitimacy as a civil rights leader questioned because I would dare stand in solidarity with law enforcement. But those who, I consider myself in the tradition of Martin Luther King Jr. I told you I was mentored by all of those folks that work with him. During the height of the civil rights movement, it was not black people would overcome or white people would overcome. It was black and white together, and we would overcome. That's why I reject these separations, these lines. We are all one, and we have to figure out a pathway forward in every neighborhood and every circumstance. So the truth of the matter is, there are minority voices that are kicking and screaming, talking about things like defunding the police and all those other kind of things. But the vast majority of the American people, recent surveys have found, more than 90% of white Americans and more than 80% of Hispanic and African Americans want the same or more law enforcement. What we have allowed in this country over the last several years is the small minority of those people that you're talking about who benefit from wartime. We have allowed them to take and seize control of the message and the voice, if you will, around these policing issues. And what we've done with Faith in Blue Weekend is given the majority of our communities the opportunity to take that voice back and stand in solidarity. There are some challenges. We will figure those challenges out together, but there's not a problem in this world we can't solve
when we work together.
When we work together,
absolutely. You never underestimate the strength of human spirit. When we're committed to do something, we can certainly do it. But it all starts with mutual respect.
Absolutely.
And so that's the beauty of this. Let's talk about why this initiative has the benefit of doing something much greater than maybe a whole lot of other. Not to say, look, anything we do to build these bridges with communities and in law enforcement, maybe we lost that a little bit along the way. Let's look, a tale of two cities. We can point to law enforcement agencies that in the quality of life in those communities are great. They're doing good because everyone is working together towards a common goal. And then we have others where we have there's a whole bunch of spokes in a wheel that provide the quality of a community. And you break one spoke, now all of a sudden, law enforcement is going to take the brunt for it because we're the ones that people can reach out and touch the most. And really, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, we need to be able to I've always said the powers we have as law enforcement officers are directly related to the trust that we have within our community. We have some work to do. There's no question. It's not to say that we necessarily always getting it wrong. I'm not saying that. I think if people took time to understand a law enforcement perspective of the things that we do, they would have better appreciation. And likewise, in reverse, if speaking to the very people we serve, that's really the catalyst of what modern policing is. So why is this model so much better than maybe a number of other initiatives out there? And let's talk about that faith-based access to thousands of churches across this country.
Well, because there are there's never been a movement for successful or positive social change in America that was not anchored in the faith-based community. Faith-based organizations have always, since the founding of this country, been the backbone of progress for our communities, no matter what the unique identities and identifiers of those communities are. Plus, there are more faith-based organizations than any other kind of civic or community group in this country. They are places of hope and healing and restoration and reconciliation. They're safe space so that communities can feel welcomed and officers and departments can feel welcome to come to tables of respectability, respectfulness, and solutions. So what we've done with Faith in Blue Weekend in partnership with FOP and all the other national organizations is we've taken the best of what we learned over the last 30 years about what works in community policing. We've taken the best of those things. We've taken the best of smaller programs that happen during the week where not as many people can participate, like National Night Out on Coffee with a Cop, which are all wonderful. But we've taken the best of all of those things and put it in the context of the most powerful community institutions in this country, the 350,000 faith-based organizations that assemble sometimes dozens and hundreds and even thousands of people every week. Those faith-based organizations are potential force multipliers for an agency or a department's public safety and community engagement goals. They are bridge builders and they are ambassadors. They have vast and wide networks that can be employed and should be for public safety and community engagement goals of every law enforcement agency. This is where I am with this now, Pat. We need all hands on deck. We are at a critical point. Crime and violence is surging, as we talked about. There's so many challenges with retaining and hiring law enforcement. Nobody wants to be a cop because of all of the challenges and the attacks and the assaults. But if I were speaking to any group of people, no matter what their race are, what their race might be, I would say, let us all be the change that we seek. We cannot afford to sit on the sidelines and lament one another. My challenge to the Black Lives Matter and the Blue Lives Matter crowd is stand down. Let's come together and figure out a pathway forward in every neighborhood and in every circumstance. And that's what these faith-based organizations have an opportunity to do.
You talk about the respect of law enforcement, and there are those who exploit this because their own personal gain from it or whatever, dividing Americans. But a recent poll by Morningstar says that 84% of Americans across all political parties and backgrounds and in a high percentage of Black and brown communities, the ones that are the ones that are affected the most by these crimes,
Absolutely.
say that they are united in the belief that that crime is a major problem in this country and needs to be handled.
And that's why that was one of the reasons why we created, as you know, Faith in Blue Weekend. We have to amplify the voices of that 84%.
Right.
We have to give the law enforcement, because that 16% or less than 16% that seeks to demonize law enforcement or drive wedges between law enforcement and communities are causing the majority of the nation to suffer from these increases in crime and violence, which affects economics. It affects all of these other challenges. Look, Faith in Blue Weekend 2022 is October 7th through October the 10th. It's a Friday through Monday. Every day over the course of Faith in Blue Weekend, I challenge every organization, every agency to go to the website, faithinblue.org. Every tool, every resource has been prepared. There's a toolkit. There's no cost. Everything is laid out, sample activities and everything. We need all hands on deck to raise the voices of the majority. And let's shift this narrative. Let's change the conversation, and we can do it. But it's going to require all of us to take action. And Faith in Blue Weekend, as you have said in the past, this weekend leads to another and to another and to another. And I can't tell you the number of law enforcement agencies that have reached out to my staff and I that said, look, what we started with Faith in Blue Weekend has grown and grown and grown and grown to scholarship programs and training and all kinds of opportunities. But as you said, it starts with one conversation. And that's what we want every department to do.
I can tell you that I receive, after Faith in Blue Weekend, I receive calls from, or in emails from my members saying that what a great experience they had because they were asked to speak at their church about their job and the importance of their job, and you know, it felt so refreshed for people to take time and really want to understand exactly who they are, because you're right, there's not a single person that got in this job other than the desire to do good, and there's 800,000 of us out there doing it. You beat me to the punch. I was going to ask where people could get more information about Faith in Blue, and we'll put that up on the screen for them to see it, but also it's not. There are a lot of organizations involved in helping amplify the voice of Faith in Blue Weekend. Talk a little bit about that partnership that you have with so many different groups and why it's important. This is the one thing that we all can rally behind, because it truly does make a difference at the end of the day.
You know, I really didn't. I didn't recognize, to be honest with you, when we started organizing Faith in Blue and sought to build partnerships with all the national law enforcement organizations, I frankly did not recognize that it had never been done. I did not recognize that what we were doing was historic in its nature. But I'm very proud to share that every major national law enforcement organization in this country, both professional and membership organizations, are partnered together for Faith in Blue Weekend. That's obviously FOP is one of our anchor partners. FOP has been right there from the beginning. You and I have traveled the country together promoting Faith in Blue Weekend. Others on your team and at the state level and even the national officers have been very supportive and advocating. But as well, that's true for some of the other police organizations, including some of the other unions and IACP, major city chiefs, national sheriffs, just everybody working together. The power in that cannot be underestimated, and we are just we're ecstatic that state level police chiefs and sheriffs associations have joined in this effort. So now we have the chiefs and or sheriffs associations in 48 of the 50 states who are also partnered together for Faith in Blue Weekend. People want solutions. People want answers. People want hope, and this is an opportunity for us to deliver.
You know what people want? People would rather light a candle than curse the darkness.
Yes.
And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're creating that path to better understand each other's needs. That's really starts again with that one conversation. And you know, we'll put up on the screen the list of all the organizations that have rallied behind this to help with this. You know, but I have to tell you, you know, my 36 years of law enforcement, my last 20 years we're running a section for my department that built outreach, you know, victims assistance and outreach programs. And I got to tell you, I don't think there's not an agency in this country that should not be looking at Faith in Blue Weekend as an opportunity to build that support within their community, regardless of whether or not they feel they have a problem in their community or not. What we do in as law enforcement officers, well, we serve a public. We are the public. And I'll tell you who law enforcement officers are. They are Little League coaches. They teach Sunday school. They live in our communities. They're the person next door, the guy or the woman next door. We're ordinary people and probably members of these churches to start with. So what a great opportunity to get that information out. I appreciate it. One more time, if you could tell us what somebody registers, what benefits, not benefits, what assistance do they get?
So any law enforcement agency, any FOP lodge, any organization in the community can go to faithandblue.org. On the website, under the resources tab, is everything that you can imagine. There's a planning toolkit that has many sample activities. There are T-shirt designs and banners and postcards. Every law enforcement agency across the country has access to a specific staff person. We have staff persons that have responsibility for every region. They can reach out to us at 404-605-7000 or on the website faithandblue.org. faithandblue.org. In closing, Pat, I want to share something that you just raised. Sometimes I hear from police chiefs who say, well, we don't have a problem in our agency. The challenge is what affects one law enforcement agency or officer directly ultimately affects every agency and the profession indirectly. When the officer that killed George Floyd did what he did to George Floyd, it did not just affect that officer or even that agency. Law enforcement professionals in Alaska and in Florida and Hawaii and Louisiana and Georgia felt the impact of what the response was, what the reaction was, what the actions were. So we need all hands on deck with regard to Faith in Blue Weekend to help shift this narrative, change the discussion, and really get back on track and drown out, frankly, the voices of division that would rather divide than unite.
Well, I'm going to take it a step further. You say that it affects everyone in the United States, every law enforcement officer. We're part of a international association of police unions where we speak regularly, and I can assure you that the incidents, that 8 minutes and 46 seconds on the street of Minneapolis has had a ripple effect throughout this entire globe. Every free society that provides policing has addressed the issues or had some fallout from that particular incident. So it is, yeah, absolutely. And I'll also tell you that I'm a firm believer of the fact that even if you think you have a good community, and even if you think you've checked all of these boxes, the reality is that the time to build those relationships are not when something's on fire.
In a crisis, yeah.
Absolutely. It's I call it management by crisis. It's to build those relationships on the front end so everybody understands the complexities of what we do. And I can tell you that we're proud to be part of this, and since the very beginning, and our lodges across this country are very much engaged in working with their agencies to set up these events through Faith in Blue Weekend, and like to keep them going. Rather, it's just if we can do it one weekend, we can do it the other 51 weekends of the year. So I'll start in that conversation. So again, thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you for your friendship. I mean, I know the viewers may recognize that we have some synergy and some rapport, but I consider you a friend. We had an opportunity to meet. I was honored to speak at one of your conventions. I believe it was a conference where you were elected president. I was delighted to be there, and I really appreciate FOP. A lot of people will question me on that, but I appreciate the fraternal nature. There's some good people in FOP. I disagree with certain positions that every organization that we work with takes. But I recognize that leadership means that we build friendships and we see the overwhelming things that we have in common and not be so distracted by whatever the challenges might be. So in addition to our work with FOP, I really appreciate you as a friend. I really do. And sooner or later, you're going to bring me to Louisiana to fish with you. I just believe that at some point you're going to let me come down there and catch some of those redfish in that bracken water.
Well, we can probably make that happen for you, and I feel the same. Likewise, appreciate all that you do in helping build those bridges, and I've always said, it's not what we do. Not that that's not important. It's not, not the product you sell. Not that that's not important. The services we provide. Not that that's not important. At the end of the day, it's really all about the relationships we build around them, and that's the premise of this whole initiative, is to build those relationships, and let's get beyond this difficult time in society, and let's push back on those people who would rather divide us rather than unite us. Thank you, and I thank you for being here, and to our viewers and listeners, thank you for tuning in to The Blue View, where we talk about the things that are so vitally important to the men and women who suit up and show up every single day in communities all across America. Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. To get the latest from the National FOP, make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at GLFOP, and on Instagram at FOP National. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.